The Literacy Council, every time I get in front of a microphone, I have to tell about the Literacy Council. It has been here in Williamson County for about 28 years. And when I moved here, people kept saying, everyone knows how to read in Williamson County. Everyone is rich in Williamson County. I heard lots of falsehoods about Williamson County because there are people here that can't read. And that's the #1 mission of the Literacy Council, is to help every person read better. And then as the years have gone by, we realized some people don't have access to materials to read. So we do that. And here at Legacy Crossing, we have a book club that meets every week, read different books and discusses them. And that's most of the fun of having a book club, is discussing the book. And one of our facilitators is going to read today. And Tom, what's the name of the book you're reading? The Girl with the Pearl Earring. So it's been meeting for about 2 years now. I want to say a special thanks to Trish and all of Legacy Crossing for hosting this event. It's always just so enjoyable to get together on a Sunday afternoon, and they make it just a beautiful place to be. I want to thank the Literacy Council Board and its volunteers for coming today and being a part of this. And Channel 3 is taping, and it will be shown at a later time, and I'll get that to Trish so she'll know. And now I think we're going to be ready to start. This is going to be quite informal. We're just going to go down the line and read the stories. When your name is called for your story, if you will acknowledge where you're sitting so we can all see you, that would be a help. Bonnie, I think you're going to start off. Okay.
Thank you, Rita. So our first story was told by Shirley Batchholder. Is Shirley here?
She's in California.
Oh, how
But
nice.
she wanted her story included, so she made sure it was here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Her story is called The Lovebirds. Miriam had just gotten engaged to Henry. She was 90. Henry was 92. They were a sweet couple. They sat at the retirement facility dining room table. Miriam twirled her newly received diamond ring. Suddenly, it popped off her finger and fell to the floor. "What was that?" Henry said. "It fell on the floor." "Oh, what fell?" "My ring." "Oh, you dropped your ring." "I'll get it," Henry said. After a while, Henry found it. Smiling, he held it out to her. "For me?" she said. "Sure, it's for you." "But Henry, this is so sudden." "I got it for you so we could be engaged." "Do you really mean it?" "Yes," he said, as he put the finger on her ring again. Her ring on her finger again? "I'll love you forever." "By the way, what fell?" "Oh, I don't know. It couldn't have been very important. I'll find it tomorrow," Henry said.
Our next story is written, the story of Claire Bordelon. Is Mrs. Bordelon here? All right, Claire. Mrs. Bordelon was interviewed by Taylor Robinson, and this is her story. Is Taylor here? Did I see a hand back? Okay, good. My interview was with Mrs. Claire Bordelon. She was born October 24th, 1926 in New Orleans, Louisiana. The best story of her life was when her husband proposed marriage to her. He was a medical student at Charity Hospital in New Orleans. Miss Bordelon also worked at the same hospital as the head nurse. When her husband proposed to her, she was only 21 years old. They had been dating about 2 years. Her husband served in the Korean War as a doctor. When her husband returned from serving in the Korean War, they moved to Virginia. After they moved to Virginia, her husband was diagnosed with lymphoma, and he passed away at age 50. They were happily married for 30 years. Mrs. Bordelin and her husband's favorite hobbies were cooking and traveling the world together. They visited many exciting places all over the world, including Scotland, Britain, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, Costa Rica, and even the Galapagos Islands. Mrs. Bordelin and her husband have 2 children, Mart and Debbie, and 3 grandchildren. Her daughter Debbie lives in Nashville and works at Vanderbilt Hospital. She seems very happy living at Legacy Crossings in Franklin and being so close to her family.
This story was told by Floyd Brewer. Is Floyd here? There he is back there. Floyd Brewer, as most people his age, has had a full and fulfilling life. For 4 years, he served in our country's military during the Korean War. Although afterwards he worked in a computer-related field, at age 60, he became an Episcopal priest. Reverend Brewer's fondest memory rings like the perfect country song. It was an average Sunday in August of 1988, and he was at church. He had been single for the past 20 years and had 3 children of his own. A woman walked up to him and said, "I don't know your name," which he answered with, "I don't know yours either." Their names were exchanged and a friendship made. 4 months later, he and the woman were married during the first week of February, because as Mr. Brewer said, the second week of February was Lent, and he did not want to wait until Easter to marry this amazing woman. Mr. Brewer was lucky enough to find true love and did not waste a single day with his wife. With her, he moved cities and strengthened beliefs. Unlike some, he held on to his love and led a meaningful life with her. It is easy to take loved ones for granted, but Mr. Brewer's love story was the first thing to his lips when asked what his favorite memory was.
Okay, this story was by Jean English. Is she here? It was an absolute pleasure meeting Mrs. Jean English. Her outlook on life and cheery attitude brightened my day. Mrs. English has been a resident at Legacy for 10 years and said she loves it here. She enjoys interacting with the many different people and learning about their walks of life. Ms. English grew up with 2 brothers, so playing in the woods and going camping were some of her favorite activities. However, her brothers were not always so friendly. Because she lived on a farm, everybody had chores. Her chore was to feed the cows. Her brothers would mischievously place rat snakes in the feed, so she would find a nice surprise every time she reached for more food. I also learned that Miss English rode her horse to school every day, and that there was even a field designated as a horse parking lot. At the age of 16, Miss English entered college at an all-girls university where she majored in science and dreamt of becoming a medical researcher. However, she became a teacher and fell in love with the 3rd and 4th grade classes. She finally retired after teaching for 40 years. She also loves to travel, and perhaps her favorite place has been Nova Scotia. She adores change and experiencing and learning about new things. She even enjoys learning about history and especially enjoys reading historical novels. She has 2 daughters. One is a nurse practitioner, while the other one followed in her mom's footsteps and is a retired teacher. When I asked Miss English what the best part of her life was, Or perhaps her best story, she simply said, "The birth of my children is the greatest story and has been the absolute best part of my life." Her wonderful children have blessed her with 3 beautiful grandkids. She has a selfless attitude and a huge heart.
Okay, so the next story is Marion Gardner. Is Marion here? And I have something in common with you. I've read at the very end of your story. It was written, you were interviewed by Sierra Gonzalez. Is Sierra here? Okay. Marion Gardner was born in Philadelphia and graduated from school there. When she was a kid, she never liked ice skating much because she kept falling, but she really loved sledding. When she was in elementary school, she walked to school. To walk to high school, she had to take a trolley, get off at the last stop, and catch another trolley, and then walk 6 blocks to school. In high school, she played piano and took tap dance lessons. A few times she tap danced downtown with her group of tap dancers. She had a costume and everything, and she had lots of fun. She also took French class, but she didn't like it very much. She did like most of her teachers, though. She has one sister, and they were 10 years apart in age. They didn't spend much time together until they were older. Now they talk on the phone every week. The sisters lived very close to their mom and dad after they were married and babysat for each other. She was her sister's bridesmaid. She also met many different people in the shipyard in Philadelphia during World War II. She and her friends dated a few of the men that came into the shipyard. She kept in touch with one she met, and later they visited each other. She and her friends invited servicemen to dances and USO events, and that is how she met her husband. She married him when she was 22 years old. Her husband was in the Army in World War II. Although he was never injured, he never talked about the war. I can't imagine they were happy memories, Marion says. He passed away in 1992. She used to work for Arco Gasoline, and she moved from Philadelphia to California for her job transfer. Luckily, her family lived there, so she really liked moving there. She's also lived in Texas, and with her family in Arizona, she lived in Mayfair. She lived with her daughter for a while, and then moved together here in Tennessee. She really likes it here. She has one son, Craig, and one daughter, Gail, who were very friendly together. Her son was drafted, but he had braces, and so he wasn't qualified to be in the war. Marion says braces were the best decision I ever made. Marion has been to Greece, Europe, Italy, Hawaii, and Bermuda. She lived in Philadelphia and was in a senior group that went to all of these places and had fun trips. She was about 50 or 60 when she was in that group, and she really liked it. She enjoyed seeing how people live and how most people were very friendly. She has 8 great-grandchildren, but sadly hasn't met any of them because they all live so far away. She has 6 granddaughters and 1 grandson, and 2 of her grandchildren live here in Tennessee. Marion Gardner is 90 years old, and she really likes it here at Legacy Crossings. She went on a boat trip along the Mississippi River with a group from Legacy, and also she enjoyed the Elvis concert. She was an Elvis fan when she was younger, and I'm still an Elvis fan.
Our next author is Nancy Gates, and the story was collected by Juan David Barajas. Are those people here? Oh, there she is. One of the best stories for Nancy Thomason Gates centers on her family and their education. It all started in high school where she met her sweetheart, Gordon Gates, at Little Rock Central High School. Then from high school, they both went to Fayetteville University. Gordon was studying to be a medical doctor, specializing in anesthesiology, while Nancy was studying to be a teacher. From there, pursuing higher education seemed to run in the family. They had 2 boys and 2 girls, and they all went to college. Stephen works in real estate, Timothy has a master's degree in computer science, and both Julie and Susan got nursing degrees and work in the medical business just like their daddy. After the kids finished college and got their degrees, Nancy went off and did a whole bunch of traveling. 16 countries worth of traveling. She went to Peru, Brazil, Spain, Portugal, Switzerland, Israel, Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, St. Petersburg, Hawaii, Jamaica, Bahamas, Mexico, and Canada. That is quite a truckload of countries, but her favorite is Switzerland, possibly because of the delicious chocolate. It is evident that Nancy's stories tie all around with her family, education, and God. These factors have helped to mold her into the woman she is today, and there might not be any other better story.
Thank you. I get to read a story provided by Ray Helton. Is Ray Helton here? Of course, of all the places, I was looking back and completely missed everything that was right in front of me. And this was co-authored. Ray, you know how to pick them. You get two girls to author your story. It's great. And their names are Tony Pierce and Laura Penn. Are Laura or Tony here? Well, this is going to be a good story, one way or the other. Ray started out by saying that he told his authors about his best life story. I'm surprised at how many of these involve travel, but it's good to see that there are a lot of good traveling experiences to be told. In order to avoid being drafted in the war, he made the decision to join the U.S. Coast Guard. This required him to drop out of high school halfway through his junior year. He traveled to Maryland and then took a train to San Francisco, where he was assigned to a ship that was loaded with guns, trucks, and tanks. And explosives? Too, of course. Yeah. As it turned out, he entered the Coast Guard 3 months before the war ended, so he never had to see any action. Elated that he did not have to enter the war, he traveled to Oakland Bay and the Hawaiian Islands. He then went to the Philippine Islands and Hiroshima in Japan. There he couldn't believe the devastation he saw. It looked like the ground had been burned off because of the bomb, and he saw nothing but fishing cabins everywhere. Stacked up everywhere were Japanese rifles. He was intrigued by them, so he decided to take one home, and still has it to this day. Because of joining the war efforts, Ray had been part of a world he never could have ever possibly dreamed of if he had stayed in his hometown. Ray, where is your hometown?
At that time, it was in East Tennessee.
East Tennessee?
Yes.
South of Knoxville?
What?
Was it, you said East Tennessee?
I mean, below Knoxville.
Below Knoxville.
Over in.
So you're born and raised in Tennessee then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Born in the Smoky Mountains.
Wonderful. Hey, that's a great place to, not only to visit, to be born in. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, this is quite a story, and I especially enjoy reading this, and we've got a couple other World War II stories to read too, so I'm going to look forward to those. But those stories are harder and harder to find. So I appreciate you having the opportunity, Ray, to read your story to the group.
Wanda Hook is the next lady's story. Wanda, I know is here because she's in our book club.
Right over there.
Hold it closer to.
Okay.
Wanda Hook, and she's in our book club. It's written by Peyton O'Kane. Is he here? Co-written? Okay. When I first started talking with Mrs. Hook, I was expecting to hear the typical stories you hear from your grandparents. But my expectations were gone, proven wrong.
Yeah.
But our expectations were proven wrong. Yes, we did talk about her childhood, but I was much more interested in her adulthood. Growing up, she said, that was one of the things that really stayed with her. She clearly remembered growing up during World War II in Detroit, Michigan. During her high school years, her family was unable to get gasoline, so her brother, who was in the Navy, sent them cigarettes so they could sell them and have money for gas. Mrs. Hook and I talked for a few more minutes about her childhood and the differences between then and now. And then she told me about her traveling. I've always wanted to travel, so this really caught my attention. She said she helped plan trips for a travel club down in Foley, Alabama. Because she helped to plan the trips, she didn't have to pay for them. She has pretty much been all around the world. Too many places for me to list. Some like London, Germany, France, San Francisco, New York, and so many places. She told me she had photo albums full of her trips, so we headed back to her room to look at them. As soon as I set foot in her room, her refrigerator caught my eye. It was covered in magnets from all the places she had visited. It was amazing. In a bedroom, she had shelves full of photo albums. I looked through maybe 3 of them. She had such beautiful pictures of Germany and London. I enjoyed spending time with Mrs. Hook and learned about her amazing travels. When I'm older, if I get to go half of those places she's been to, I'll be happy. She told me that when she thinks she hasn't done much in her life, she looks at all of the photos. I'd say she has done more than enough with her life, and she should be proud. She is such a nice woman. Thanks, Mrs. Hooks.
Appreciate your patience. Tom and I had to work out the microphone routine, but hopefully we got through at the end there.
The next story is is written or is told by Lou Holmes. Did I pronounce it right?
Over here.
Hi. It was written by Juan Davis Barajas. Is he here? Okay. The best story of Lou Holmes' life centers around the idea that life has its ups and downs. It is through genuine faith that one pushes through and succeeds. This is evident in numerous cases, but most definitely in the death of her sons at age 38 and 48. Though both of these deaths were heartbreaking, Lou relied on her Christian faith to carry her through one of the hardest stages of her life. On a happier note, Lou had a wonderful high school career, especially with an extremely stern principal of Greek descent. He roamed through the school, and wherever he went, a hush would fall over the crowd, as if to hear a pin drop. Her favorite subjects were literature and English, and from then on, books became her lifelong friend. Lou Holmes is a woman whose trust in God and friends has served her greatly through friend, family, and relationships.
The next story is about Bill Johnson. It is his story. Is Bill here? No? Well, maybe it's just as well, because I was just glancing over this story, and this is a pretty cute story, and it's true, and it could make a TV show. Carla Arnett was the person who interviewed, is this Carla in the back? Yeah, who interviewed Bill. It was a cold and frosty morning in Asheville, North Carolina. Bill Johnson was about 12 years old. He was eating breakfast at his grandma's house with his cousin Tommy, who was 10 years old. They were ready for school, and they went out all bundled up, ready for the bus. As they were waiting for the bus, they saw a bunch of buzzards in the field. As they got closer, they saw that it was Granddad's old mule, covered with buzzards. Tommy said, "Let's catch one." They went after the fattest one, and then they spotted a box of dynamite. Of course, being the mischievous boy that he was, Tommy said, "Let's blow him up." They caught him and tied dynamite to his leg. So there was the buzzard with the dynamite tied to him. He was a big, heavy, fat buzzard. He was so heavy he could not fly, so they threw him up in the air. And down he came right onto Grandpa's barn. They were terrified and they ran for their lives. They ran and they hid under the porch, and then that fat buzzard blew up along with the barn. They heard Granddad say, "Up, boys," and they knew they were in trouble. Granddad said to go into the bathroom, where they promptly got punished with the razor strap. And to this day, Bill still has scars from that boyish adventure.
This story is told about Kelly Kellerman. Is he here today? Mr. Kellerman, are you an Irishman? Because you certainly have the look. And this was written by Carla Arnett. Kelly Kellerman believes he has lived a charmed life, and by all accounts he has. He says he's nobody special, he was never a good athlete or a good student. He never had any childhood diseases. There was nothing exceptional about him except he seems to have a little angel hovering over him, watching out for him. Here is just a sampling of the near-death experiences he has been saved from. When Kelly was a baby, his older sister was watching him. She sat down at the edge of a construction site to watch what was going on. She lost her balance and dropped him into the basement where they were digging. He didn't get hurt because a board with a big nail protruding from it was leaning against the wall. That's right, his baby's gown caught on the nail and kept him from hitting the floor. Episode number 2 occurred when he was a little older, a toddler. His father was working on his car in the driveway, and he was sitting behind the car playing. When his dad decided to move the car, he did not know that Kelly was there. He backed out and knocked Kelly over, and the wheel of the car grazed his head, removing a lot of hair. He also ran over a part of his foot, but no broken bones. Episode number 3 also involved a car, maybe the same one, a large 7-passenger 1925 Studebaker touring Pantheon. The family was out riding with his aunt, uncle, and 2 cousins. The road was pretty good, but a few potholes here and there. His dad was probably driving a little faster than he should, and when he hit a pothole, the rear door flew open and Kelly flew out. He grabbed the door and hung on for dear life. The main thing he remembered about the incident was his mother yelling at his father and a lot of words he was not allowed to use. The next incident occurred when Kelly was about 12. At the end of his street was a large park with many undeveloped acres of forest. There were wild grapevines everywhere. They were large and strong enough to walk on, and of course that's what he did. You know, Tarzan did it all the time. Kelly never considered that a branch might be dead as he leaped out and caught the branch. He was somewhat surprised when the branch broke and he fell head first toward the ground. He never reached the ground, however. Somehow another grapevine became entwined around his foot and he was brought to an abrupt halt. Episode number 5 occurred when Kelly helped a neighbor dam up a stream to make a swimming pool. It even had a diving board. This sounds dangerous. But Kelly's fun came to a screeching halt when he dived into the water and into a submerged log.
The head bump was pretty bad, but the real damage was to his hand. A large nail driven into the log had ripped his hand. Had he hit the log a few inches to the left, the nail would have done severe damage to his head. The next incident, number 6 if you're counting, happened when Kelly was sitting on a crossbar of his friend's bicycle. They hit a pothole. The bike spilled and Kelly was thrown into the rear wheel of an oncoming dump truck. Fortunately, he hit the truck and did not go under it. He ended up with a badly sprained foot and some burns from the tire, but that was all. The bicycle was untouched, by the way. The next episode occurred when Kelly was a teenager. He was riding in his friend's 1936 Plymouth sedan, along with 8 of his closest friends. His friend was preparing to make a left-hand turn and asked if any cars were coming. The passengers said no. He started to move and they screamed, "But there is a truck!" The driver slammed on his brakes and a large semi-tractor trailer missed them by inches. Episode number 8 occurred when Kelly was a working man. He was headed to work on a cold, icy morning. As he applied the brakes, his car slid toward a truck. He knew that if he went under the trailer, the top of his car would be sheared from the body. At almost the same time as he reached the floor, his car collided with the trailer wheel, and although no harm came to him, his car was totaled. 69 years passed until the next episode, number 9. Kelly was in a senior theater troupe. On this particular day, they were having a dress rehearsal for a scene from Grapes of Wrath, the one in which Lenny gets shot by his cousin George. They didn't have a fake gun, so they borrowed a real one from one of the cast members. When the gun was placed against the back of his head, he started to get nervous. Well, you can guess the rest of the story, but Kelly survived. The bullet just pierced the skin, nicked his ear, and the bullet fell harmlessly to the floor. He did lose a lot of blood, with doctors telling him his odds of surviving a shot at point-blank range were about 1,000,000 to 1. Anyone want to go gambling with Kelly Kellerman?
This is Thea Kerstetter, is that right? Is she here? Can't hear? Is that better? I hope it is. Thea Kerstetter, is she here? Hello, how are you? Written by Savannah Fulmer. During World War II, Thea Kerstetter wanted to take college psychology classes, but couldn't. Later in life, she got a job in the health office at a college and started taking those classes to earn her psychology degree. After graduating, Thea started looking for jobs in public relations when she came across an advertisement that said, "Able to motivate large groups?" As it turns out, this was an ad to become the public relations person for a blood bank. Thea went through the interview process. There were 32 applicants, and at some time she was sure that there was no way she would get that job. But at 44 years old, she got it and knew it was the right job for her. From there, Thea started on a 20-year career that took her all over the United States. She had the opportunity to travel to places such as Boston, Anaheim, Las Vegas, and New Orleans with the blood bank. And it was her responsibility to motivate people to donate blood. Thea once had to speak to a group of men's union negotiators, and they gave her no reaction to go off of when she was speaking. But she quickly found out that when they took off their coats, they meant business and were ready to talk. She recruited many volunteers all over the nation, and she flew over 26,000 miles. Thea ended up falling in love with her boss at the blood bank, and they were very happy together. From this experience, Thea learned that when the little voice in your head tells you to do something, you do it, and it will pay off.
Well, now you can tell that we're out of order here, but I wanted to read this one since Maria, my wife, and I had the pleasure of picking George up at the steeplechase, and George has quite a story. I thought I heard some good stories on the way in from steeplechase, but there are some other stories. The one he's written here is even better. George, I'm going to have some questions to ask after I read this story. But it is, I mentioned earlier that we had several stories that portrayed World War II. And this is one of those stories. Now, I read Ray Helton's stories earlier. George and Ray both spent time in the service, World War II. Both were in the Pacific. But I think that's probably as close as you got one to the other during that time. But George's story is written by Carla Arnett, and now Carla's here, right? Carla? Good story. Good job. And George, of course, is sitting here in the blue jacket. I bet, gee whiz, I should be introducing the person for whom the story's written, or about whom the story's written. So George, if I make some mistakes, you're welcome to add on. We can kibitz on this. George Lorenzo has had many exciting adventures in his life, including going into the service when he was 17 years old. Something else, right? It's like your experience. He wanted to sign up so badly, but being underage, his father wouldn't sign the papers. After much persuasion, his father finally relented, and George became a serviceman in World War II. He was the ship cook, cooking for 2,000 soldiers in Japan. His favorite thing about this job is that he got to serve ice cream. Now, come on, George. You got to eat all that ice cream. That was the good news. Extra helpings. But one of the most exciting, or at least infamous stories, happened recently. This adventure was a newsworthy and baffling event. An event for Ripley's Believe It or Not. Actually, this adventure is what brought George to Middle Tennessee. You see, about a year ago, he lived in Palm Harbor, Florida, and George still has a condominium in Palm Harbor. That's one of the things I did learn on the trip over here, where he loved to landscape and do work around the house. But an event happened that changed his life. He was found one day unconscious, passed out in the bathroom. While that might not seem so extraordinary at first, you have to know the rest of the story, and also know that George is living alone in that condominium in Palm Harbor. George was found in the bathroom and had been there for 5 days. The emergency crew couldn't revive him, found no vital signs, and prepared to take him away as a DOA dead on arrival. Suddenly he moaned, and they realized that he indeed was alive. They called for an ambulance and took him to the hospital, where he remained in the ICU for 5 more days. His whole body had shut down. So that is the story of how George came to live in Middle Tennessee, to be close to his daughter who lives here. We never know what twists and turns our life is going to take. George, we're glad to have you with us today.
Okay, I'm reading a story about August Lovegren. Welcome. And it's written by Chandler Allen. Dr. August Lovegren was born of missionary parents in West China. He attended elementary school in Chengdu, China, and graduated high school at Marshall High School in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He received his BS degree from Stanford. Was it supposed to be Stanford or is it Sanford? Stanford. Okay, Stanford. Okay, Stanford University in Birmingham, Alabama. He majored in chemistry and minored in biology and math. He then attended medical school at Wake Forest College and received his MD in 1946. He did his postgraduate work at Southwestern Seminary. Dr. Lovegren was 11 years old when he accepted Christ as a Savior. He was 31 when he went to Jordan in 1952 and was a missionary there for 35 years. He's been to every state in the United States, and Minnesota is his favorite. He has one brother and 2 sisters. He and his wife have 2 daughters. Dr. Lovegren retired at age 66 in 1987. It was a pleasure to interview and get to know Dr. Lovegren. What an inspiration for a 16-year-old who is going on his first mission trip in March.
This next story is from Pat Orr. Are you here, Pat? Oh, hello. You look lovely today. It was written by Elizabeth Quarles, who has been an interviewee for a number of years. Pat Orr was born on June 23, 1923 in Lancaster, Ohio, which is a town near Columbus. She was the youngest of 5 children. This June, a very young-looking Pat will be 90 years old, which is difficult to believe. Pat has a very welcoming smile and a friendly, charming presence. She was a joy to meet and talk with. The most important time of her life was meeting her husband-to-be. While in college in Columbus in April 1942, Jim Orr came to Pat's sorority house to pick up his date. And Pat answered the door. They stared at each other, and Jim asked if he could have some water. The 2 of them went to the kitchen and talked until his date arrived. The next day, Jim called the house mother at 7:30 a.m. and asked to talk to Pat. They went on a date soon after, and things were never the same. Pat had been going steady with a high school boy from home and had promised to accept an engagement ring from him at Christmas. But meeting Jim changed those plans. In early 1943, just before Jim was called to active duty, Jim and Pat became engaged. At first, they were going to wait to get married until after the war, but then decided to take the train to Minneapolis and got married on July 24, 1943. One interesting story Pat shared was that she and Jim both grew up in the same area, even though they never met, and spent each summer at Buckeye Lake. His family had a cottage on one side of the lake, and Pat's family had a cottage on the opposite side of the lake. Every summer, their families would vacation there from May through September, and then return home to begin school. Jim and Pat used to tease each other about which side of Buckeye Lake was the best. Pat taught swimming for many years and also taught organ in the afternoon after school. She also is an accomplished artist and loves to draw and paint. In 1982, Jim retired and they bought a home on a golf course in Fort Myers, Florida, where they both could play golf. They traveled frequently. One trip they stayed at a bed and breakfast and visited England, Scotland, and Wales. In Wales, Pat was able to find her grandparents' birth records. Jim and Pat had 3 children together, 2 sons and 1 daughter. One daughter lives in Franklin, 1 daughter in Columbus, and her son is in Tucson, Arizona. She has 6 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren, plus 1 on the way. Jim and Pat were married for 64 and a half years before Jim passed away a few years ago. She still misses him a lot. Since Jim passed away, Pat has been very active as a member at First Presbyterian Church. She also plays the organ for worship services at the Manor at Steeplechase and loves living there. She calls the Manor her sanctuary. She walks every day for 2 miles, inside or outside, and is very healthy. A sweet story Pat told me about was when she and Jim had just moved to the Manor. Centennial High School each year hosts a prom for the residents, and some students ask the residents to dance, and refreshments are provided. Jim and Pat Orr were pronounced as king and queen of the prom. Jim wanted to dance with his wife, So he asked if the students would play 5'2" Eyes of Blue for my wife with her pretty blue eyes. Pat said that even though he had Parkinson's disease and was in a wheelchair, they danced. It is very obvious that Jim and Pat Orr had a wonderful marriage with a very special love and respect for each other, an accomplishment that few couples achieve these days. Pat's heart of gratitude is reflected in a poem she wrote recently. I am having so many blessings in my life today. God is shining on me in every way. I am thankful for my loving and caring family. What would I do without their love for me?
Now that we have the routine down, I'll see if I can do a better job with the microphone. But Pat, you mentioned your husband Jim was in World War II, and he was what, a B-25 bomber instructor? A lot of World War II people around. Thank goodness.
I guess they call it
Instructor pilot. That was a tough plane to fly too. That was special. Excuse me.
Our next story is Marilyn Polk. Is she here? Back that back. It's written by Chandler Allen. Is he here? Marilyn Polk was from West Frankfort, Illinois. Marilyn was raised with 3 older sisters. Growing up in an urbanized area, she helped her parents in the flower shop and greenhouse. One of the biggest things that happened in her life was in middle school when she accepted Jesus. During her high school years, she enjoyed many different activities, including swimming, acting, speech competition, and going to Danny Kaye movies. After high school, she studied dental hygiene at UT Memphis. Later, she taught dental hygiene to many students, and then eventually opened her own dental hygiene school at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale.
Thanks, Tom.
Our next story is by Robin Cole Rice. Is she here? All right. This was written by Taylor Robinson. Is Taylor here? All right. I got 2 for 2. Great. My interview was with Miss Robin Cole Rice. The best story of her life was her marriage to her husband and birth of her 4 children. Miss Cole Rice was born in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Her father served in the Navy during World War II. She married her husband when she was only 19 years old. She loved spending time with her husband, and they had a long and happy marriage until he passed away a year or so ago. She loves and cherishes the many years she got to spend with her husband. She loved her years living with him in Florida because she could be close to the ocean. After her husband passed a year or so ago, she moved to Franklin in Legacy Crossing to be close to her daughter and grandchildren. She has a total of 6 grandchildren, 2 boys and 4 girls. Her daughter works for Vanderbilt University and they live in Nashville. She likes being close to her grandchildren and spending time with them. She has been able to keep her memories of living on the ocean alive, even though she is living in Franklin, by decorating her apartment with pictures of ocean scenery and palm trees. I enjoyed interviewing Miss Cole Rice, and she seemed very happy to be at Legacy Crossing, close to her family, who live in Nashville.
This next story is about Lois and George Walper. Are they here with us? Right here. Okay. And it was written by Elizabeth Quarles. Lois and George Walper met in elementary school in 1938 in California when they were in the 3rd and 4th grades. Their first date was in 1939, and they went to the mall to have a chocolate malt. This is their best memory. And I have a question. Was that to the mall in that year? Okay, so they shared a chocolate malt. That's their best memory. Lois was born in Whittier, California. She had one brother. She graduated from Walla Walla University in College Place, Washington, and received a nursing degree from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. George was born in Pasadena, California. He also had one brother. He received a BA degree in music, organ, and piano from Stetson University in DeLand, Florida. They were married August 28, 1949, which means that they had been married for 63 years. On their wedding day, they had their reception in a club ballroom. They had 2 children, a girl born in 1951 and a boy born in 1953. George worked at a school and taught music. He also worked in the defense plants during the war. Lois worked in different hospitals in Florida. During their marriage, they traveled to all 50 states. They have also traveled most of Europe and Greece. They enjoyed the trip that they took to Kenya, and another trip 16 years ago took them to Taiwan. It was nice meeting the Walpers. I think the neatest fact that I learned was that they met and became friends in elementary school. They have shared a lot of wonderful memories together through the years, and I hope in the years ahead they can make many more.
And you know, they were right. Some of these stories can be made into a TV series. Thank you everyone for coming today. Is Ruth Schmidt here? Ruth? No, she's not. We got to give her some special thanks because this painting you see right here was made by her. The one that's in the front. What a nice one. I do want to thank the volunteers and the board members of the Literacy Council for helping with this project today. You know, I'm just going to try to reiterate what Rita said, that, you know, what we do here is we actually help literacy in Williamson County. We are a private nonprofit. What that means is we don't get any money from the government. The government always gives money to other countries. We help people in our county right here. And our biggest supporter is United Way. And this program right here was made possible by the Youth Advisory Council of the United Way. So we do thank them for their support. Also, the books that you see with all the stories, they are for sale for $5 a piece if you want some extra copies for your family. And every dime of that $5 goes to the Literacy Council. All the support you guys give us is also appreciated. Thank you for coming, and this has been a great event. Thank you, everybody.
The cornerstone of our democratic society has been and continues to be public education. Early settlers recognized the importance of education and banded together to build the Little Red Schoolhouse to educate their children and improve the quality of life in their settlements. Williamson County has its own Little Red Schoolhouse on Moores Lane. This cornerstone served students in the past by focusing on the traditional 3 R's: reading,
Carson, if you'll begin under lesson
writing, and arithmetic as the main subjects of the curriculum.
Okay, class, take out your readers. And I think we left off on page 22.
But change was inevitable as our country grew and pushed westward. Williamson County schools have changed through the years to meet the diverse needs of its students.
Esther, would you like to come and show me what you did to Sam's name to change it to make it Pam's name?
When we outgrew the one-room schoolhouse, larger schools were constructed to meet the population growth in the county. New schools, such as Pinewood and Fairview, were built to provide more classrooms. Soon these schools would not meet the needs of a more diverse student population. Ramps were needed for handicapped students who could not maneuver the steps in some of these older schools. Larger schools were built to provide even more classrooms. Grade levels are now grouped into wings to accommodate collaboration among teachers and to provide for more student movement between rooms.
21, that's good.
The teacher in the one-room schoolhouse had to differentiate the instruction due to necessity because the students who attended were at different levels of learning.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Very good.
Finally got it right. Finally got it right.
The same is still true today. Differentiation of instruction has evolved in each classroom to keep the curriculum developmentally appropriate for individual students. We hope you will visit your child's school during this special week that honors American education. You will see how schools have changed since you went to school 20 or 30 years ago. There will be classes for English language learners,
Shoulder.
Show me your shoulders. Yay, very good.
children who are learning English as another language, computer labs that give students an opportunity to learn the latest technology needed in the job force.
F-E-B-C-D-A. I now know that I can say my ABCs the backwards way.
Music and art classes. Physical education for learning gross motor skills.
Soleado y fresco.
Muy bien, señorita. Gracias. Muy bien.
Foreign language classes in elementary as well as in middle and high schools. Media centers instead of just a library with books. And classrooms where children are practicing the skills they have learned in literacy workstations while the teacher works with a guided reading group.
Ready? Listen for rhyming words as I'm reading it, because I'm going to ask you about some rhyming words when we're done, okay? All right.
Like each Little Red Schoolhouse, every school is unique. But the ultimate goal is to educate our children, engage our parents, and empower our schools. Presented by the Williamson County Education Association.